Or we're going to begin anyway. So ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'd like to thank you for attending this session, which is devoted to urban freight delivery and the new approaches that have been adopted to make the sector environmentally efficient and sustainable. Now, the subject isn't one of those areas that perhaps encourages lively debate amongst family, friends and strangers. If you want that, then maybe politics and films are the order of the day. But all of us take freight delivery for granted. Most of us, the majority of us indeed, shop online. And since a swift delivery is part of what we're paying for, it's understandable that we expect our goods to be delivered on our doorsteps on time. Now, the efficient movement and distribution of products has been crucial to building economies and generating prosperity. Furthermore, the demands we impose on the freight sector will get bigger as populations increase. Let me put this into context by giving you the following figures. According to the United Nations, around 54% of the world's population lives in urban areas. That proportion is likely to rise to around 66% by 2050. Projections show that urbanization, coupled with the overall growth of world demographics, could add another 2.5 billion people to urban populations by 2020, with almost 90% of that increase concentrated in Asia and Africa. So with all those extra people, there'll be more goods to distribute, which means, for example, high traffic intensity, particularly during peak hours, along with air and noise pollution, road congestion, infrastructure pressures, and safety issues. And those are just the tip of the iceberg things. So the question is, how should policy planners and other road stakeholders confront these challenges? Does the answer lie exclusively with technology, or is it a combination of the old and the new? Well, in this discussion, we'll be hoping to look at some of those issues, and I'm joined by a panel of experts who deal with these problems pretty much every day of their working lives to a lesser or greater degree. We'll be finding out how the demands on freight have led to the growth of new business models and how freight operators are working with national and regional governments in striking the balance between making profits and meeting environmental targets. So there's plenty to discuss in the time available, and there will be an opportunity for you, the audience, to get involved. You'll be given the chance to put your questions to the panel at the end of the discussion. There are people standing by with microphones, and when you're ready to speak, we'd be grateful if you could just raise your hands and not just introduce yourself, you'll be given a microphone, but also tell us the name of the organisation that you represent. So I'd like to start, in fact, by introducing the panel members. David Sastry, who is the Chief Strategy Officer. Now, please forgive my pronunciation because I do not speak Spanish. Señor? Excellent. Wonderful. Thao Swandam, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Danish Cyclist Federation. Jens Poggense, who is the President of Freight Forwarding in the Europe region for UPS Europe. And Yan-Min Yu, who is the Executive Director and Vice President of Sinotrans. Gentlemen, a very good afternoon to all of you. And David, if you could start by telling our audience what you do and what your role is within Señor.
Okay, thank you very much for your introduction. Well, first of all, I'm gonna explain a little bit what is Seur, because perhaps some of you don't know it. Seur is a company like UPS that for sure you all know. We are a company. We are a transport company in Spain. We are the leading transport company in Spain, and actually we belong to DPD Group, which is all over Europe. So I'm the Chief Strategy Officer in that company, in Seur, and in that position, I'm in charge not only of strategy, but also in charge of marketing, purchasing, and mainly corporate social responsibility. So I'm in charge of all the sustainability and all the policies that we are dealing with in order to have more efficient transport.
Thank you. And Klaus.
Thank you very much. My name is Thao Swandam. I'm the CEO of the Danish Cyclist Federation. It's an old lady, founded in 1905, basically at the beginning of the time where cycling, as car driving, became a very time-consuming and interesting part of our mobility. I have a political past. I served as deputy mayor in the city of Copenhagen for 5 years, and was responsible for the technical and environmental administration, working a lot with city planning, bicycle plans, and so forth and so forth. So continuing in this job is of course a dream job, We are a founding member of European Cyclist Federation based in Brussels, and I'm a steering board member also of World Cycling Alliance. We try as hard as we can with a lot of different stakeholders in Denmark, and you even heard the Danish minister and also the Danish representative from the United Nations praising our cycling culture, which is similar to the Dutch, and we are very happy that we're seeing a development in a lot of other countries. But I think it's important to emphasize that all this is not only about cycling. This is basically about creating livable, sustainable, resilient cities where people want to live and where shops want to run their shops and where industries want to locate themselves and where networks can thrive. We are also the secretariat of the Cycling Embassy of Denmark, which is a huge knowledge database on cycling knowledge, cycling insights from all aspects of both commercial and public administration. Thank you.
Thank you. And Jens Poggense.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Jens Poggense, and I'm working for UPS. It's 2 years younger than Klaus's cycling organization. UPS being known as a global logistics service provider. I'm responsible in Europe for the freight forwarding business unit. Prior to that assignment, I held multiple other management functions within UPS, and some of them were also around network planning on the ground, network planning in the air, and running the air network for Europe. So everything what we heard in the last 2 hours in hall number 1, there were a lot of overlaps in there where I passed through my career and touched base on. And I need to kind of look a little bit at my notes here. As Klaus alluded to a little bit, what we want to talk about today and what we want to touch base on. And without kind of stealing already a little bit what I want to talk about, but kicking it off in a way of, I heard innovation, I heard development, I heard it across all modes, but I also heard compete, and I heard collaboration. And I think that kind of maybe contradicts a little bit each other, but at the same time, I think that goes a little bit when we're looking at how we do things smarter from a sustainability perspective, from access to cities and all that. It's not about maybe favoring one mode of transport versus the other. I think it's kind of competing in each of the modes, but at the same time collaborate with the cities, with the local governments, but also with the EU from a European perspective, and maybe you look at it a little different, also looking at it from a China perspective. As I'm also being one of the delegates in CLECAT, heading up the security institution, and do that through the representation of the DSLV. So there is also something we need to look at how we working that with the governments, but also with the Commission from a European perspective.
Okay, thank you. And finally, Jan and you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm from Sinotrans, China. Sinotrans is a logistics and freight forwarding company. About a decade ago, we move into logistics industry. So we start to build up our own trucking capability and start our urban delivery several years ago. The problem we are facing in China is a little bit different from Europe or America. For us, we think we need to do more to combine the effort of government and the business and the consumer together to improve our urban delivery system. I think what we should do should aim to achieve a better truck, faster truck, and a fuller truck to save the energy, to reduce the emission, and to reduce the accident and all. Okay.
So excellent. I think we've all got an idea about
Gut, ich glaube, jetzt wissen alle so ungefähr, was meine Gäste tun, für welche Organisation.
I talked about the importance of freight to economies, and China is the classic example of how an economy has grown, because you've actually dethroned Japan as the world's second biggest economy, and no doubt freight played a very important role in that context.
Yes, it's extremely important for us because at this moment, China has two very important factors. One, e-commerce is developing very quick in China. So almost every young people order the goods through internet. And it means we need a very good delivery system. The second point is we are undergoing urbanization. So more and more people move into the city, but the city is not ready to receive so many people. So we know freight is so important, but I don't believe we manage it very well. We need to do a lot of improvement.
Okay, I know you wanted to jump in there, Klaus.
Just by saying that also from listening in today on the conference that we have to understand that the mobility of the future and also the freight mobility is no longer a one transport mode going from A to B, but it's a combination of a lot of different things, and it will be exactly the same with the freight. And whenever I speak to a Chinese, I always remember when I visited Beijing for the first time, which was back in the 80s. I remember going on an 8-row bicycle lane crossing Tiananmen Square, and for me that was, this is cycling paradise. but I have to say there's a room for improvement now in China, and I often meet with Chinese people, and I always say you have to reinvent the strong bicycle culture that you actually have, and which was a huge inspiration for us in the West.
Okay, and it's interesting they're picking up on the bicycle analogy, because you guys have been incorporating bikes into what you do.
Yeah, and I think maybe I'm using an example, and that illustrates it best. And I'm a native of the city in Hamburg, up north Germany, and from a UPS perspective, and we find ourselves all in there, right? So we're talking about business to consumer. Everybody finds himself being once in a while on his PC or iPad or whatever device, ordering something online, and ideally when we do that, we want it tomorrow or latest the day after tomorrow, and that living in cities and people moving back to the cities more than ever before, it gets congested, heavily congested, and we tried really to get our head around there. How do we balance that from a CO2 footprint, from sustainability perspective, and we, in the meantime, we copied it to a couple of other places throughout Europe and also globally. But what we're doing in Hamburg right now is we have a pilot running there where with the city of Hamburg we agreed on a dedicated spot where we're positioning freight containers, and from there we're operating human-powered or electrical-powered bicycles to do a distribution throughout the city. So I think it's you can imagine, and you heard it earlier when Minister Schmidt talks about how healthy bicycling is. Our drivers believe in that as well. But at the same time, I think it's it was an innovative solution, still having trucks going towards the suburbs of the city, dropping containers, and from there we're using human-powered bicycles to do deliveries. And I think that's one of these innovations where this goes across modes, and it's a combination. We all being sitting on autobahns, and once in a while you stay in a queue, and then in Germany at least you see on the back of some of the trucks being posted, we are here also to serving you, as they're bringing all that stuff into the cities, what we consume on a daily basis. But we need to find the right balance in the combination of how we're accessing cities and how we make combining it with a,
Sure.
I would call it hybrid solution, how we do that right now in Hamburg and other cities with the cycles.
Sure, but basically the bicycle or using bicycles in the delivery, that's part of the innovation on one level. But I was fascinated by something that Yamin, you said, because he said that, look, we didn't really manage the transition terribly well, that you've got more people shopping online and buying goods, and of course more people moving into the cities, urbanization is picking up, etc. But there is a danger of seeing that as just the Chinese experience, because to a certain extent you could argue that we've all been overtaken by the thirst, the hunger for getting things online. It's forced innovation on us. We haven't preempted it. We've had to run with it. Is that fair in your opinion, David?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that at least in Spain, which are the figures that I have more in mind, the growth of e-commerce is about 20-25% per year. So it's changing absolutely the way that we are doing business. So the transport companies, we have to deal with it. Of course, it's an opportunity of business, but on the other hand, it's a way that we have to be more efficient, because of course the costs and the emissions of this kind of flows are new regarding our business. So from our point of view, this increase of e-commerce brings, from our point of view, four new challenges. On our case, the first one should be how we do decrease the number of flows in order to have less emissions. The second one could be in those cases that we have to go to deliver the shipment, if we can do it in a more sustainable manner, for instance with bicycles. The third one should be in the case that we have to go and we are not able to do it in a sustainable vehicle, how we can do it in order to decrease the emissions that we are doing. And the fourth one could be how we offset those emissions that we are bringing to the atmosphere. So I think that those could be the four challenges that we are tackling, that we are dealing with, and well, there are different solutions for each of them, and I think that we could talk later, as well. My colleague has introduced one of them.
And where I think it's kind of, and what the notes I took away from the hours earlier, and on one hand we talked about compete, we talked also about collaboration, and I think this is kind of where us, and I'm talking UPS or any other organization you may represent there, where we need to be constantly also being challenged by our customers, whether this is an individual consumer or is a business customer. I think we need to combine modes and optimizing then the supply chain. And why I'm saying that is also, Klaus talks about enough space in the city to cycle around. And cycle delivery could kind of helping there rather than having a lot of trucks, and making cities also attractive for consumers coming back to the city and buying there as well, and having kind of a customer experience while they're going into the city environment. But at the same time, I think it's, is there necessarily a need that we need to call on every private customer door with a single package? And I think we talked about innovations on the digital side and on data. We heard data earlier today as well. And I think this is where we are going away, where we want to have the flexibility from the consumer to pick and choose services subject to their convenience. And that might be that part of our personal city experience is you running by your bakery shop in the morning, or you running by your newspaper shop in the evening, and we making that an access points where you consolidating multiple packages or consignments into it, where a customer can pick it from there. And I think that's this kind of innovation I think we are being challenged with, and we need to bring that forward. And I think from an organization perspective, we have some real good solutions on that moving forward, but that's the way and the pace we need to keep going on that, also having the answer to an increasing B2C business environment.
So would you like to?
Regarding the solutions, as my colleague said, this pick up and drop off points, which you have your own network. We also have our own network. Just for you to have an account, if you are used to have 10 parcels to 10 different people in 2 different houses, and then we move those 10 parcels in just one pickup point, usually those people go around those shops. They don't have to take the car exclusively to get there. So we have saved 10 flows, 10 travels to 10 houses. So this is not a technological solution. This is not a technological innovation. This is just something which seems to be very logical, but it's on the first point that I said before, in order to decrease the number of flows, the number of travels that we do, which is the first point in order to decrease our emissions.
Jianmin, you've been listening to this and smiling rather wryly, because we're listening to what the representatives of the companies are doing at their level. But is any of this applicable to China? Because we're dealing with a completely different economy, and it's the growth that we've seen in a handful of years has been quite phenomenal. But would some of these solutions that are being put forward here, could they be applied to your country, or is the need somewhat different?
Yes, that's a very good idea. And actually, we did some experiment. Just for example, for food. The present behavior is everybody go to shop to buy, or we order through internet. Then internet deliver, the express company deliver the food to the house. It's not good for any part. For the people, for the consumer, they have to wait at home, waste the time. And for the express company, they need to use trucks, maybe in the future bicycles. But anyway, they need to stop, go upstairs, and go back. So it costs a lot of time. The truck will wait there, or maybe they need one driver and one people to deliver it. That's not good. So we try to use a new method. We start from our own company. Of course, we have a cold chain warehouse, and we set a cold chamber in the basement of our office. And when our people order food through internet, we delivered all the cold chain food to the basement. Before, for example, if we are off at 5 o'clock, we will before 4:30. So everybody can go home just to pick up from the basement, put into his car. It can keep a good temperature and very convenient. If somebody need to work more, no problem. They can pick up the goods anytime he want. So for the trucks, we can use big trucks and only one stop. Then for the next, people can use their own car to bring it back. Then we want to expand this experiment to all the society, of course, only for food. We can set up such kind of pickup point in the basement of office building. If every office building has kitchen, they need a big refrigerator either way. And we can set up such kind of pickup point in big residential criteria, because after that, after we discharge there, we can use bicycle or tricycle to deliver to the home when the consumer calls. So I think this is very good.
So that's when it's integrated using the bicycle.
Yeah. So it's a good idea. I think we should do that way.
Yeah, but I think
so you will be doing it then.
But I think both the Chinese example and what Jens is saying is that this is very, very much about innovation. It's about innovation on the commercial side, on finding new solutions. It's commercials from, it's innovation also when it comes to shop or industries, but it's definitely also political innovation. And I think we are experiencing a time where different stakeholders in an urban area, in a greater urban area, have to communicate and dialogue and have a much stronger dialogue in actually finding out what works and what doesn't work. And I think it's very human that we like leadership by example. And I think public authorities are the best to basically be the first movers or the first runners in introducing certain policies or certain regulations or setting up certain demands to the people who deliver to them. And I also think it's important that when we talk about urban freight, we do not only talk about delivery of things or delivery of buying, we also talk about services that need to be brought around. The other day in Copenhagen, I met a guy outside my office who runs a company who's called the Cycling Locksmith. And he told me he actually has he earns more money than his colleagues because he gets around to more clients. Because more easy to get around. He had to exclude some big institutional clients because he cannot carry stuff to work with their lock equipment, but for private facility, it really works well. And I think that's also a point in basically being innovative in your approach as a guy who runs a business.
Isn't that also having a more integrated system? Because we talk about freight, there's a danger we look at freight in isolation, but we can't do that because at the end of the day, it has to coexist, blend with the mainstream system as well. There has to be a point where the two can work together without the one undermining the other.
And I think this kind of, that other word I had was collaboration and really across modes. I think we still have a tendency, and also from a political perspective, often putting things into one box and don't let them out again. So they're sitting in a penalty box, and that's being done there. If we're looking at city logistics, we're talking about the 3.5 tons vehicle, we're talking about the smaller sized vehicle. Right now, we brush it all over, we treat them all the same. And I think this is where when you're talking about where the political side needs to join the party, and I think your minister made a commitment, and maybe before he leaves this week, we may put him on scale him, and then next year he comes back, we re-rate him to see how much he did out on the vehicles, on the cycle. No, but I think it's kind of, he talked about capturing the low-hanging fruit, and I think that's good, but at the same time, we should not lose focus on make that really broader and not just kind of single-sided on one mode of transport or one solution and say, oh, that's easy to grab, let's go with that. As you heard also then on the panelist, everybody talked about taxation, or no, we just talk about a price tag to certain things, and I think this is where, and it's part of the EU road package, but I think it's in the empowerment of the individual governments. What are we doing with road toll and road charges? And we make it extremely complicated. If you're looking at it, and I'm talking Europe right now, there is no harmonized system.
Because certainly tolls are very expensive. It's not just ordinary motorists who are hit by this, but a lot of freight companies complain as well because of the costs. Yeah,
and it's kind of, it's just complicated when we're talking about digitalization and efficiency gains we want to do on road freight. One of the hurdles is that you're having these devices in your truck, and you basically can't move from A to B where you want to go, while you make crossing borders and you have to change systems. And at the same time, while we're talking about that, then the other encouraging thing is when we talk about what are we doing with the road charge and the road toll.
Well, that was the point that I was going to raise as well, because the tolling system, it's often seen as very political in the sense that we're told, yes, you're paying tolls for the benefit of the road users, but I guess that what many road users want to know is, well, where does the money go? Because we don't actually see any real improvement. And of course, I guess from the point of view of the customers, it could cost you guys business if on the one hand the costs are going up and it's the customer who has to pay, the end user.
And I would add in one more, if you'll allow me. And I think it's Tony talked about the aviation piece. And you may all recall that we talked about the CO2 emissions and the charge in aviation to buy, right? And I that's where you differentiate by mode, and there was a lot of buy-in into that, as the income tax you generating through those emission pieces was not directly necessarily linked and connected and bundled back to the investment into airport infrastructures or something like that. And that's probably where it was flying easy, as you have a tax income and it goes somewhere else. When the same goes with the road toll and charges is, what about you bundling that and make that necessarily being reinvested into infrastructure? This is what we're talking about, making infrastructure better. Just think about bridges all over Europe, kind of a big debate on you can't pass them, and we're doing detours of 50, 100 kilometers just to get around and not workable infrastructure. And here we are talking about green logistics, talking about sustainability, CO2 emissions, while we just accepting we have to do a detour of 100 kilometers as we can't cross that bridge as there's no money to build that in. So that's kind of where I would throw that in for the discussion as well.
David.
So, yeah, it's, as far as I understand it, this is an holistic problem which needs of holistic solutions, because we have moved from business solutions to political solutions. So for sure we need political solutions, for sure we need new regulations, we need new investments. I think it's going to be quite difficult that from this side we're going to solve it, but of course that we have to move forward in order to get that. I would like to say a word about innovation, because we've been talking about innovation from our side. Just we'll solve the political problem later, but regarding innovation and regarding technology, I think there's another thing that we can do, another potential solution, which is regarding the quality service that we have. I mean, if our quality service increases, that means that we don't have to go a lot of times to a home in order to deliver a package. And that is one of the problems that we are usually dealing with in our daily routine. So from our perspective, just by trying to get a conversation with the receiver, I mean, not with the business that actually buys our services, but with the user, bring that conversation to the point that, in our case, we say to that person, we are going to deliver your package between 4 and 5 in the afternoon. So the possibility that that person actually is at home, so that is a succeed delivery, and we increase our quality ratios, is exponential. Since we implemented this new strategy, which was at the DPT group, it was something like 3 years ago, we have increased our ratios, we have increased our quality, we have increased the satisfaction of our users, and what is more important, we have decreased a lot our emissions. So that is another technological innovation which drives into best business solutions and less pollution, which is something like a good thing to start with.
Is it in the corporate social responsibility mantra of delivery companies like yours? Because once upon a time, I mean, this just shows how much the world has changed. There was a time when concerns about the environment were seen as very fringe. And now, of course, it's very much on the mainstream, and astonishingly, there are funds, for example, investment funds, who will only put money in companies which actually uphold issues of corporate and social responsibility. They have to be very green and whatever. And would you say that, yes, you have improvised, you have made changes, you have tried to embrace the new technology, the new greener technology as and where possible, but is it now part of a social and responsibility issue rather than because you've had to go along with it anyway? Is it now in the company DNA?
From our point of view, it's a strategic axe. I mean, as I said to you before, I'm the Chief Strategy Officer, and I am the Corporate Social Responsibility Director. So it's one of the main strategic axes that we have in order to deliver our value proposition to the market.
So just to be the devil's advocate, you've been pushed into that basically because the tide has changed. People are going to use delivery services, etc., but they are environmentally sensitive. They know what they want. They want to live in smart, clean cities. You're part of that, so you have to deliver.
Yeah, things are changing, I think.
But the point is, I mean, this is damn good business. I mean, by being innovative in this field, you can actually earn money to your company. Your competitors in DHL, and you probably have the same numbers, they say that by using cargo bikes for urban freight delivery, they actually per bike have an extra revenue of 10,000 euros per year. It's quite a lot of money. You actually also create jobs. You even create jobs for a group of citizens that are difficult to find jobs for, because now I'm talking about cargo freight bikes, but I mean, driving those, it's not rocket science, to be honest. I mean, you can do that with a quite limited number of education. So I think it's very important. I mean, I try, when I advocate for cycling, I mean, I like to talk about sustainability and CO2 emissions and carbon footprints and corporate social responsibility and blah, blah, blah. But basically, at the end of the day, this is about being more efficient as a society, making sure that industries make more money, that states and governments get higher taxes so they can actually live up to the responsibilities that you have as a welfare state. And I think two of the studies, there are not many studies, but two of the studies that are made, one by ECF, Recommendation for Cycling Logistics, and the other one here from Pro E-Bike, a new mode for businesses, they both shows that everybody is really wild about going into this, trying to use the cargo e-bike. I mean, they may not know a lot about it and feel a bit insecure about it, but suddenly when they get a little help to sort of implement that, and I mean, I don't think it's the complete answer to anything, but I think everything, but I think it is an answer to some things.
Right, so integrating it into your freight strategy. I mean, Yamin, is that something you've considered? Would it be applicable at all, this bike, in what you do, or is it perhaps a little bit too off the wall yet for the moment?
I have to understand correctly. You use the term bicycle, but if I understand correctly, your bicycle include the tricycle, right?
Yes.
That's practical. If you look into the urban area in China, you will see a lot of electronic tricycles there, mainly operated by e-commerce company or express delivery company. Of course, they have some problem. For example, like a special lane, speed limit, they have no special parking place, something like that. So I think encourage to use electronic tricycle, definitely there's no problem, especially in China. It's a trend. But returning to the point of political side, I do realize government, the policy is very important to improve the freight system. For example, if you look into the big city in China, you will feel very sorry for the truck driver. Why?
Why?
Because the police department or maybe Department of Transport ask them to have a special permit to enter into the city. And definitely the permit is not enough. With that number of permit, the people in the city will die because the food is enough, goods is not enough. So every company use some permit, and a lot of other trucks, they don't have permit. Then when they enter into the urban area, every policeman or government body, they can give them fine, punishment. Then that becomes the part of the cost of transportation. And nobody know who will be fined and when will be fined.
But that's a system problem, isn't it, with the politics? That has to be addressed if it's impacting on the delivery companies.
That's why some of my colleagues proposed to me that we should talk to government, please, not only government and society, please don't treat truck as a secondary class citizen. Because we can see no truck will wander around in the city because the cost is very high. The only passenger car, maybe somebody want to do some sightseeing, they will drive a car. But we cannot imagine somebody will drive a truck. So when trucks enter into the urban, they have something to do, to deliver. So it's very important. It's like public transportation. So we need to give them special privilege during a certain time or certain area. That's very important.
Okay, so that sounds perfectly reasonable.
And
Controlled access.
Yeah, but I would not limit it just to trucks. But quickly getting back to your previous question, I would not put a revenue amount to it, but our organization made a strong commitment from a sustainability perspective and emissions, and that goes with the human-powered cycles, the electrical cycles, alternate fuel vehicles, the methane and all that good stuff. And it definitely drives efficiency gains. Plus, when we talk about telematics and digitalization on optimizing a route for a driver and just avoiding the base kilometers I talked about earlier. So that definitely is the right thing to do, and there's a commitment, and that goes with innovation and solutions moving forward. But we need to tie that then back also where through our associations, through whatever tool and vehicle we have to delivering the message and continue in the dialogue with the local governments, but also with the EU and also in overseas, China's government, whatever, we're talking about rail services out of China, which might be also a good alternate. I think we need to watch out a little bit that we don't play one mode against each other. And I heard earlier today, and that's the last time I referred to the earlier session, as I think this is a good session. I heard eco trailers, and Denmark has them really working. And I know examples where we talk about, hey, we would love to use more rail, but we know that the passenger rail is working more favorable than cargo rail, and the differentiation between the ones who operate and the ones who own the network and border crossing and all that good stuff, which makes it a heck of a complicated to more use the rail network. But I think we're ending that up in a dialogue where maybe somebody on the rail side thinks he would not support the eco trailers, as this maybe can cannibalize his business. And I think we need to get over that hurdle. We need to make it more broader, and we need to harmonize that. The same thing like we talked about this road toll harmonization and interoperable models. This is where we also need to get a little bit out of these individual boxes by mode and think about it broader. And that's us as the operators, or as the service providers need to come up with these innovations, but this is where the governments needs to join that and not necessarily penalizing something.
Sure.
Just to stop that.
Because this is the problem, that yes, we know what we want, a harmonised system, and there is the danger, as Jens pointed out, that one mode could get played off against the other. From my experience, for example, living in London, you'll find that it's very, very difficult for trucks to coexist alongside bicycles. One is accusing the other. There's a sense amongst freight users and also ordinary motorists that the pendulum has swung too far in favour of the cyclist. Now, I don't want to get involved in that argument one way or the other, but it is this sense that one is being persecuted, and the bigger message that it sends out that perhaps economically you're not as important as other forms of transport in the big puzzle.
First of all, it's about infrastructure. It's about segregated infrastructure, and it's about investing in that infrastructure. Normally I say that 150 years ago, our society all over the world invested a lot of money in railroads, and that was sort of the new way of transporting the masses and the goods around. 75 years ago, we invested enormous amount in car infrastructure, which is great if you're a car driver or drives a truck or drives a lorry. Now we just have to put a third grid on top of that, and that's a grid of bicycle infrastructure and of course also pedestrian infrastructure. I actually do disagree with you by saying that I agree that we have to bring in goods and food and all these kind of things to the city. But I don't agree in that every lorry necessarily should come into the city. I mean, I demand as a citizen in the city, as a part of the traffic system in the city, as a cyclist, I demand that at least the lorry is full, for example. I will not accept a lorry bringing something in that is only 100 kilos, which could easily be transported on a different mode. I totally understand that if you are building a new subway or constructing a big house, that you need to carry really heavy big things in, which there's no alternative way of carrying. But I think we have to put on regulations on how much can you actually, because we made surveys in Copenhagen showing that actually quite a few lorries were bringing in not so much in each lorry. And I think that is also a part of developing the system, and I think there's a big responsibility in the business there.
But certainly on the part of governments, if you're actually going to regulate when trucks can go in, or certainly the loads that they need to have when they're going in. But I know that Jan Min, one of the points that you've also raised as well is this need to have special lanes put aside for trucks. So you've also talked about the technology of trucks to actually have those which can operate in cities, which are greener and nicer. But again, it's that controversy from the point of view of the driver. Taking away a lane means actually reducing the amount of road space we have also, as well, the cyclists.
Okay, let me clarify myself. I don't mean I encourage all truck go to the city. We have some other way to let the truck to be fuller. Yeah. And when I say something about give truck drivers some privilege, I mean let them go faster, not more trucks. I mean less trucks, faster trucks. If we don't give trucks some privilege, it means the truck will stay in the downtown for longer, much longer time. This is what we don't want. Yes, I agree we can use electronic tricycles, but we cannot imagine how to bring the goods from the outskirts of the city to the downtown. Anyway, we need to use trucks. The only thing we have to do is we let the truck to be fuller, to be fast. So when I say that thing, we need to do something, let the trucks be faster. China not the only country we have problem. I think we can look into a lot of big cities in developing countries. Trucks went in, but sometimes only half or one-third of the cargo. And when they delivered to the retailer, like Metro, Carrefour, European retailer there, you can see a lot of trucks maybe only deliver one truck, but they have to go in. And the receiving dock is very limited, so they wait. If they cannot find a place to wait, then they turn around. That's not good. So the government should do much more. We should start this problem from planning. We need to build some, maybe I can put the word city distribution center in the different direction of the city. Maybe Europe you have, but China, in the past we have. Now we don't have anymore. Why? No, the problem is the land now is very expensive. If we are a logistics company, we cannot pay that high cost for the land. So the government would prefer sell the land to real estate developer. But no matter how beautiful the house is, if there's no logistic system, how can city survive? It's like a beautiful apartment without a washroom. So this is what's happening. And in China, it's not only the price of land, it's another problem. Because land is very rare. So the government will need you give them guarantee how many taxes you can pay. We are from logistics. We cannot make a lot of money. So we need a city logistics center in different direction of the city. This should be designed as a public infrastructure. And if your method wish to be successful, we also need to allocate some place in the urban area. Maybe we can call it the urban distribution center inside. And then we can use truck to deliver cargo from city distribution center to the urban distribution center. Maybe that's small, but we should plan. So we can drop there, and you can use your tricycle.
Yeah. that's the intermodal system at work there. But also as well, changing the way, the look at infrastructure. But look, we're also talking about regulation as well. And this is the point, that what comes across from all of you is that freight regulation appears to be disjointed. Now, what is concerning about this is that you've all got targets that you want to reach. And how are you going to hit those targets if you're getting mixed messages, mixed attitudes about freight, what it should do, the coexistence with other forms of transport? And in terms of being beacons of good practice, that disjointed structure can undermine that, can't it?
Yeah. I think that we all should be aligned. I mean, it's like if we were two kind of people, just the regulation and the business people. And I think that we all should be aligned and working, collaborating, as you said before, I think is the solution. And just listening what you were talking before, I think that again there is room for a lot of us. There is room for a lot of means of transport. So there is room for a lot of taxes and for a lot of profit. So I think that everything is related to, let's say, segmentation. Perhaps we could segmentate our flows regarding density, or distance, urgency, weight, whatever. And so one mean of transport may be the best solution, like cycling. The other, regarding different distance and different weights, should be, for sure, the trucks. For sure, the more efficient than the trucks are and the more load than they have, the more sustainable they are, the more profitable they are, the more taxes the government gets. So it's the best solution. So I couldn't like to confrontate our solutions from one mean of transport to the other, and from the business solutions to the political solutions. I think that, again, coming back to the start of this speech, we should collaborate among competitors. We should collaborate among the states, among the regulators, and we should collaborate among means of transport, because otherwise we're not going to move. I mean, things are evolving, the world is changing, and we are usually trying to use only our weapon, or the weapon that we used to use. And we have to, I think that we have to move forward, and we have to think in a different way in order to collaborate better. And for sure, we're going to be in the market trying to get better customers and trying to have more profit. But I think it's not opposite to collaborate, and it's not opposite to be sustainable, and it's not opposite to having different means of transport. That I think that there are room for all of us.
It's how you cooperate, basically. Yeah. Jens.
I would probably answer that a little twofold. On one hand, and that's where I'm just talking about the organization I'm working for, we will continue innovating our solutions, and we just recently, I need to say that. So UPS, United Parcel Service, everybody gets that. We call ourselves United Problem Solvers. And I think that's an excellent theme where you're looking at the complexity of challenges and requirements out there to solution that. But that's the one-fold side of the answer. The other thing is, and I talked about what we're doing with ClearCut and with DSLV, for example. I think we need to be constantly really collaborate, innovate, and developing it. And it is pretty much a European perspective. But if you think Europe, I mean, it's kind of, and I hope on the 23rd of June,
don't mention the B word.
The cross will be made on the right, in the right place, and that we stay a larger Europe. That we need to continue moving things forward, like the current road package. There's a lot of good stuff in there. Is it easy? I think it's a long way, but I think there's good ideas and good solutions in there, and this is where we need across through whatever association we are being organized in, continue kind of playing that drum. And talking up to the European Commission, talking about the local governments with the respective representations we have in those associations, and push that forward and really going in. We're talking about this harmonized road toll charging fee and the right reinvestment into infrastructure. We're talking about the cabotage thing. We're talking about driving hours, driving bans. I don't know how much you have that in China, but that's kind of where you may also looking in, making it flexible in certain geographies or in certain times to relax that out for freight trucks to move, right? And those are the things where I think we just need to continue pushing that forward. And I think we have a lot of good, strong arguments out there. And this is where we can just put that forward as a group of representations in there and country government associations putting that forward and really play that. Where I think more on the organizational side, it has always been difficult kind of see how much you align there and sync up on that. But I think we will have good, strong companies out there like my company to continue innovating supply chain solutions.
But you're in the position where you can.
Yeah, I know.
Because you guys are in the position where you can because you're very large, so you can cut out the competition. Really, you've got the advantage that size and reputation gives. Doesn't leave much room for other innovators, does it?
And I mean,
other innovators.
You know, I think there's a lot of room for innovations, and obviously, to a certain degree, size matters there. At the same time, we do that also kind of through the associations where I think everybody can benefit from, right? So it's not kind of an isolated approach there. So I think this is where it's not about us talking to a certain government or whatsoever and maybe things going to happen. I think this is where we need to look at what are the opportunities in the European marketplace, right? And that goes along with whatever to come, right? I touch base on Brexit, TTIP, whatever.
It's the second time you've touched on Brexit.
That gets even broader and more important that we get that right moving forward.
Do you think but just when you're looking at the freight issue generally, I mean, the cyclists, you guys have always been there. You've always been promoting this point and saying, look, don't confine us to the margins. We can be part of your solution. You've always been there. You're the constant. But do you guys feel that the service suppliers, that to a certain extent you have been overtaken by events here, that perhaps you've misread things? Who wants to be brave enough to tackle that one? Do you feel that you've been overtaken by events to a certain extent, that you've gone along with things? Yes, the internet has exploded. We've got the whole business about shopping. We've got urbanization. We've got so many other issues that have come out of that, and you are responding. But are you acting behind the curve, that you've been overtaken?
Could be. To tell you the truth, could be. Perhaps we are not leading. We are not leading the movement. Perhaps the society has evolved faster that we have, but
you've underestimated the challenge, in other words.
Yeah, could be. But the fact that we are here, just talking about that, is that we are reacting. So
I tend to disagree. I think we see a lot of in the whole transportation industry, in freight forwarding, we see a lot of innovations, and that constantly going. Does it please everybody? No. If you talk to Klaus, he wants to see more cycleways, right? No doubt about it. He wants to see infrastructure on that. But I think this is where you go into this collaboration thing. So we see a lot of innovations in there. I think the question would be where our challenge is sometimes the infrastructure doesn't catch up with that again anymore. And I think that's a shortcoming. Right?
So you're ahead of the game, not behind it.
I wouldn't say ahead of the game. I think we going with the market how that explores. We talk about e-commerce, B2C, B2 retail. We're talking about these access points, and I think we do things there. We're innovating there, and sometimes we even leading it. But I think sometimes you're stucking also then and getting to hurdles. And I just give you an example. We're talking about the refugees in Europe, and it's a big thing, right? And we started to create, again, artificial borders, which doesn't exist in Schengen, right? But we started to do road controls. And there's no differentiation where we innovated and invested a lot in road security, safe tracks, secured commodities running on our tracks, and everything. We invested in security systems on the tracks, but we're still ending up sitting at this artificial border in our trucks queuing up for hours and hours and hours, not making maybe a service commitment. And this is, I think, where with those challenges coming through Europe and other geographies, this is where governments and the political side needs to step up and also consider that and don't box that again and penalize maybe an industry. And I think this is more where I see the opportunities working with them together, and I take that from the earlier session where at least people signaled that they are open for dialogue and moving forward.
But you've got the lead for the moment. There's a danger that you could lose it because of the politics, which is to a certain extent beyond all our controls. But from your point of view, Zhang Minyu, do you feel that, yes, China has undergone a phenomenal transformation in a handful of years? It's caught the world by surprise. But do you feel in relation to your industry that you're keeping pace, or that you've fallen behind the curve, or that, to take Jens' view, that maybe your industry is ahead of the game?
I think it's very difficult to answer. In some respect, we are ahead of the average. But on the other hand, we are behind the change. For urban delivery, I think we are behind the trend. We need to make a lot of change.
Okay. It's at that point that I'd like to throw the debate open to the audience. The gentleman in front with the red shirt, I think, over here. The gentleman over here. Would you like to stand up, and somebody who can give you a microphone? If you could give us your name and the organisation that you represent, please. Thank you.
Yes. Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Marco Sorgetti, and I'm the director of FIATA. That is the International Freight Forwarders and Logistics Service Providers Federation. I wanted to say that I look at urban deliveries also from a slightly different point of view, because we tend to think that if we deliver the stuff to the supermarket, that's the end of it. Well, that isn't actually. It's just midway, because the end of it is on the table or in the wardrobe or on the cupboard or on the bed or somewhere else. And I don't think that it is particularly more efficient to drive thousands of cars into supermarkets to drive away a packet of salad or something. You have to look at it more inclusively, in the sense that what is the overall picture? I mean, if everybody were going to the supermarket by bicycle, I mean, by all means, let's just do it. But I mean, it just doesn't happen like that. People actually take their cars to drive for 300 meters sometimes, and that is very inefficient. Of course, maybe this is not the reality in Copenhagen, because I lived a little bit of my life there, and it was very interesting and a different pattern. But if you go to other places in the world, it just isn't working like that. And in my view, when you think of logistics, you have to think from where it comes from to where it eventually ends, including the part which is for the consumer's ability to provide. If you deliver a parcel with any kind of public, say, commercial services to their homes, that's actually where it ends. That's the end of it. But if you deliver it to a supermarket or a distribution center, you still have a further leg, which normally gets it gets disappeared from the picture, but it actually emits emissions, and sometimes much more than the other parts that are commercially organized. So I think that we really have to be very careful about how we calculate. There are so many elements in calculating the carbon footprint of any given item that gets onto your table, that in my view, doing it superficially is the worst service that we can do to ourselves. Thank you very much for listening to this.
Thank you. Would anyone like to respond to that?
But I think I think you're making a very, very good point, and I think again I will draw the sort of the policy card. I think it's important to have this discussion on a political level. And I think there's, at least from a European point of view, I think there's every reason to acknowledge that the EU Minister of Transport, all of them, agreed on cycling as a climate-friendly transport mode, acknowledging that over 50% of all car rides in Europe are less than 5 kilometers. So also for the commercial traffic, if we can distinct some of that individual transport, we actually make our society more efficient by making space for the commercial traffic that basically generates money. Because driving some salad home in your car from the supermarket, I'm sorry, it does not make our society efficient or create a greater revenue there. That comes from completely different sectors. Okay, fair enough. Did you want to respond, or would you care to respond?
No, I parked it.
You're right, you'd be okay then. Let's take the gentleman over there, and I think there was a lady over there as well in the beige jacket. You're just going past the lady there. Let's because I saw her hand pop up first, and I promise we'll get the microphone to you, sir. So the lady, could you introduce yourself and the organisation you represent, please?
My name is Sophie Punte and I work for Smart Freight Center, which is a global NGO on freight. I have a question to Mr. Yu about nano stores. Nano stores are small stores like 7-Elevens, but usually owned by private operators. In developing cities that can reach to 90% of freight delivery going to those stores, say like Manila. In Beijing, I understand it's 55%. My question is whether those nano stores could become a drop-off point for freight delivery, whether it's groceries or anything else, because they're much closer to people's home, and at the same time they're usually open all night, all day. And I didn't hear you mention that, and I wanted to know if you've thought of that option and if you think it's a good idea. Thank you.
Nano stores.
Yes, I agree. And actually we are using that network to provide the various service, not only limited to logistics. I think that's very good network to provide a lot of basic service to the nearby residents. We would like to use that point to receive some, for example, cold chain food, because we only need to put the refrigerators there. And for them, it's very convenient, and for us, we save a lot of cost. If we build our own, the cost is very high. So we will form an alliance with them. That's very good. We are doing this. Thank you for your observation.
Okay, there was a gentleman over there. Okay, the gentleman there, please.
Добрый день, уважаемые коллеги.
Good afternoon, colleagues.
Конечно.
Please,
да,
sure.
Конечно. Алексей Двойных, Министерство.
I'm Alexis Vaine from the Transport Ministry of the Russian Federation, the agency of transport within the Ministry of Transport of the Russian Federation.
So we do not have a translation, but are there any Russian speakers? You speak a little bit of Russian. Ah, I'm about to receive some headphones. I'm sorry, I don't speak Russian. I do apologize.
А у нас есть переводчик.
Thank you very much. Okay. So you are from the Ministry of Transport.
Да.
Okay, can I speak now? I hope you're all equipped with headphones.
Very talented in the linguistics department. I can hear myself now. Okay, so Russia. So your question, please, sir.
Да. Спасибо.
Thank you. There are two questions, actually, that I have for my colleagues, and the first question is, when talking about freight delivery by trucks, and when talking about bicycles being used for further distribution, then I'd be interested. And this, by the way, is a question to the colleague from Denmark, above all. How are we supposed to do that? And I will explain why I am addressing this question to the Danish colleague, because we have a similar nature, meaning we're northern states. So what I would like to know is, will you do this throughout the year using bicycles, that is, or are there limitations that you use bicycles in a certain season only for freight distribution within the city? That's my first question.
Wonderful saying in Danish that says, no such thing as bad weather exists, only bad clothing. Of course, there are certain challenges when it comes to cycling in very, very, very heavy snow. But there are also obstacles driving a car in very, very heavy snow. It is about maintenance. It's about cleaning the bicycle infrastructure in the winter. It's maybe a question of putting on winter tires also on your freight bicycle. It is about, of course, knowing your machinery in the sense that is it especially sensitive to winter conditions. But having said that, I know the climate in Russia can be pretty tough, especially during winter, but I think that actually goes for most of Northern Europe. I mean, even I've seen very, very heavy ice and snow in Berlin, for example. I mean, and I think, of course, there are some days where it doesn't work perfectly, but yeah, it shouldn't stop you from doing or trying these things out.
Before we proceed, can I just let David Sastre and Jens Poggensen know what the question was, because you're not wearing the translator's headphones. What the gentleman was asking, the first of the two questions, is when talking about freight delivery by bicycle, how are we supposed to do that? Would you do this throughout the year, or are there limitations? So that was the question. I believe there is. Did you wish to respond, Jens, or can we?
Yeah, I can do that also. And I think obviously there are limitations just given by the size as well, right? So there are certain weight limits what you're carrying out by a bicycle. And what we're doing is basically we don't totally replace our truck or old-fashioned delivery, distribution or pickup by bicycles. We complement that. And I think this is the combination of innovations. And we're having the human-powered ones, we have the electricity ones, or the electrical ones, and I don't know, it's kind of, let's kind of be really innovative. What about a snowmobile crossing Moscow city limits? I think it's kind of, there's no barrier, where we just need to look at cross modes to bring in alternate solutions, which enhancing the city environment and releasing it rather than being stuck in traffic. And I think we have that in almost every large European city. I think it's kind of you as well as I experienced to drive through the city of Moscow and how complicated it could be. So everything we can be innovative, I think it's a little bit complementary and then to be adjusted based on severe weather conditions or whatever you have in subject to geography where we are in. So it's not a, hey, one replaces the other. It's kind of one complements each other, and the more innovative we get, the better.
Okay, David Sastre, would you like to respond?
I completely agree. It's not only one thing or another. For sure, we have to use all means of transport. And regarding limitations, again, I think there will be size or weight. It could be the density. I mean, where the density is quite low. For instance, for the bicycles, it's quite difficult because you have to be on on a bicycle for a lot of kilometers in order to deliver only one parcel. So, and in some cases, well, the profile of the city also in some cases regarding when we don't have an electrical engine, of course we have to take that also into account. Those would be the limitations. But I think it's not a limitation. I think those are characteristics. But I don't think it's a limitation, because limitation has like a kind of negative connotation.
Sure. Okay, and your second question, please, sir.
Благодарю, спасибо. Еще у меня такой вопрос. Буквально 2 года назад.
I've got a second question. It was about 2 years ago that in Moscow, the capital city, the decision was taken that after midnight, no lorries would be allowed in our streets anymore, in Moscow, that is. It was relatively difficult for this decision to be taken. It was a very controversial decision. A lot of people were bothered about this, and of course the lorry drivers worried as well. However, Moscow is a special city. It's a huge city, 12 million population, and it's a multifaceted city. So it was a very difficult decision to be taken. However, the decision was taken after all, and now lorry drivers can use the city's roads during the day, but not after midnight. For that, they would need a special permit. My question would be the following. What is better, to have one big lorry in the city or 10 smaller lorries looking after the distribution traffic? Let's take it, there is a big cargo to be shipped around. You know, the city is very big. It's not always possible to deliver goods like that after midnight. So would it be better to use smaller 3-ton lorries? So what would be better? Should you take 5 or 8 of those smaller ones rather than one big one with a very high tonnage? So given that we are a big city and given environmental problems as well.
So that second question was looking at the size of lorries. The gentleman was referring to some initiatives that were taken in Moscow 2 years ago. The decision was taken that after midnight, no lorries could be allowed in the street. It was a controversial decision. His point is it better to use 10 smaller lorries or 8 to convey
Нет, наоборот,
goods?
могут ездить. То есть они днем не могут ездить, sorry. Они днем не могут заезжать в город.
Maybe I can put it in more precise terms. I would like to add something. In the old days, they were allowed to drive in the city, and now there are limits on that. They can drive only as far as the so-called ring road and are only allowed to drive in the actual city after midnight.
Right, so there are limitations about the truck use in Moscow, and they're only allowed to go beyond those limitations after midnight. Is it a sound way of doing business? Hence the question about the number of lorries being used.
Исключить...
No? Sorry. Jianmin, would you be happy to address this point? It's really about the size of lorries, the limitations on their use in urban centres, using the Moscow example.
I don't have a good answer, but to my knowledge, basically the big truck, a small number of big truck is better than huge number. Big truck is better than small truck because less traffic, less consumption. But it depends. And I know after midnight, everybody should go to sleep. But if we put a very strict rule on this matter, maybe we have other problem because we will create day congestion. So it depends which area should be. I haven't been to Moscow, but if I'm mayor of a city, I would designate some lane without a lot of resident. Let them to use the midnight. Okay.
Okay, Klaus, did you wish to respond?
I would by far prefer smaller, not lorries, but smaller vans in the city, because I think that the bigger trucks you bring into the city, the more noisy, unsafe, and also a feeling of being unsafe, or the perception of being unsafe. I think big trucks are excellent on the highways and all these kind of places, but I really do not think that they work very well in inner urban areas. So
regardless of the time of day?
Because there's another aspect. Having been a deputy mayor in Copenhagen, I know how much people complain about noise in the street after midnight. I agree with you. After midnight, people should sleep, and no. But it is really something that distracts people if they feel a certain noise. And even though you can have soundless big electric trucks, you still have to carry the good. I mean, we all know the sound of when they roll the container over the. It's not good at night time.
I know when. Does that answer your question, sir?
Да, это интересно.
Yes, that is very interesting. The electric cars, we've only got in a small version, so only small e-lorries, but not bigger trucks. So it's difficult to use e-trucks with a higher tonnage. However, things are developing very fast, and maybe those are good prospects for the future. Thank you very much for your answer.
A question, sir. Thank you. The gentleman over there in the blue shirt and the stripy tie, you've been very, very patient, so we thank you for waiting. Thank you. Could you tell us your name and the organisation that you represent?
Yeah, certainly Michael Robson. I'm a rail consultant. Just to say that I was very interested in the debate about e-commerce. And you live in London, so you probably know that the major stations have stores called Doddle in them, where you can have your e-commerce package addressed there to be collected, and you can leave your package there to be returned. Most of the large stations have cycles, footpaths, buses, and in London, underground. So people pass through them, no extra journeys, makes it easier, means you don't have to have lots of trips in and out if you've been discussing with the lorries. That was my first point. Mm-hmm. And I think that will be extended out of London to a number of other stations as a way of doing that. The second point was about charging. Again, you're from London, so you know there's a congestion charge.
Yeah, I've been caught in it a few times.
The purpose of that charge is to improve transport in London. And you will also be aware of the huge amount of money that's been spent on cycleways in London. The East-West Cycleway, which you've probably been caught up in the traffic jams for that, but I mean, that's now built. The bus services, the improvements to rail services around London, and also the tube. So there is a hypothecated charge, which we've talked about, where the money has gone back to improving the infrastructure within the city, which must also benefit the ability to deliver because traffic flows freer because there are fewer cars. So it's just 2 points to make. Thank you.
Okay, then. So this is an instance where basically charging can work because the money feeds back into the infrastructure. Although most Londoners perhaps would say, well, we can't really see the benefit, but that's just a personal thing, I hasten to add. I'm not talking on behalf of all Londoners. I'm just simply broaching an observation, and it is not mine. Can we take some more questions, please? We do have time. So is there anybody else who would like to ask? There's a hand that's popped up there. Could you introduce yourself and the organisation you represent, please?
Arne Berensen from Berlin. I'm a consultant on cargo bikes, and I'm of course very pleased that the issue of cargo bikes comes up here, and I very much like the example from Hamburg, which I know very well, but we are still very much in the beginning of that. Hamburg is a small project compared to the size of UPS. I hope we'll see more in the future. But I was wondering, the rest of the debate was about trucks, smaller, bigger trucks. What about, and it is about green and innovative forms of transport. I think, what about rivers, boats? What about the subway system? What kind of capacities do we have there for urban freight? I'm also asking because in France, in Paris, there was the Vers chez vous company that combined cargo bikes with ships. There was a consolidation point outside the city, bringing in 25 cargo bikes, including the loading the cargo bikes on the ship, and then letting the cargo bikes off at different points in the city, and then reloading them.
Okay, so two modes of transport there, the boats and the subway systems. Who's going to be brave enough to tackle that? Jens.
and I would bring it back, and it's kind of a similarity to the answer from the question we had from Russia. I think we should not exclude anything, and we should, while we're talking about innovation. And I need to kind of, may Nicolette, you know that kind of being in the Netherlands, is it Utrecht? Okay, I think it's Utrecht. Utrecht has an example where, and you may like that, they go to an outer skirt of the area of the city. So they don't hit directly the city. They drop the freight there. Similar concept like what we do, for example, what I described, what we're doing in Hamburg. And they have a little electro train kind of carry-on piece, what they're cruising then through the city. If I get it right, I think it's maybe I oversimplify it, but it is you go to a big, like maybe you go to a city and you know right now, unfortunately, the shops in the city getting smaller and smaller, and the big shopping markets and all these areas are a little outside in an industrial zone. This is where you drop off your freight, and then from there you have multiple kind of vehicles to distribute through the city in a very smart way. And that could be bikes, that could be electronic little trains, whatever you want to use, or you're using any existing rail tracks which make kind of crossing the city, where cities having that kind of infrastructure. I think that there's no boundary to it. I would really call that, you may designing it by specific cities and the existing infrastructure and capitalize on that, right? At the same time, and back to, you put a dollar value to that, you're looking at efficiency gains, and you may kind of focusing on specific modes where you're developing that further based on the experience and the innovation you have done. But I would not limit it to just one-trick pony cycle. It could be different things as well, like alternate fuel vehicles as well.
Okay, so hence the need for system integration. But sadly, I believe that time has gone against us. I think that my coordinator is in agreement with that. Yes, he's nodding his head vigorously. I would like to thank you all for attending this special meeting, but also I would like to thank my guests for putting aside the time to be here today. If you could please show your appreciation to David Sastre, the Chief Strategy Officer for SEOR. Thank you. Thao Swandam, the Chief Executive Officer of the Danish Cyclist Federation. Thank you. Jens Poggense, President of Freight Forwarding for the Europe region for UPS. Thank you. And of course, Yanmin Yu, the Executive Director and Vice President of Sinotrans. Thank you so much, and hopefully we will all meet again. Thank you.